Okay, let's dive right in. Welcome to our 24/7 reality. I want you to just imagine the heavy glass doors of a massive grocery store locking right behind you. There's no exit, no natural light, just those buzzing fluorescent bulbs overhead and 32 other desperately determined people staring right back at you. That's exactly the situation we found ourselves in. We were dropped into the ultimate test of endurance, and the stakes were pretty simple, honestly, but absolutely brutal. Outlast everyone else in the building and walk away with $250,000. So today, in this explainer, I'm going to walk you through exactly what it took to survive the aisles straight from the inside.
So I gotta ask you right off the bat, how long could you actually survive locked in here with us? Day one. Well, it felt like a dream to some, but an absolute nightmare to others. The sheer scale of the challenge just sets in immediately. The air is freezing, the aisles are impossibly long, and you look around and realize that every single person you see isn't just some fellow shopper. Nope, they're an obstacle between you and life-changing money. The environment turns cutthroat way faster than you can even imagine.
And man, the first real punch to the gut hit us like a ton of bricks. We scoured the entire store, literally ripping through every electronics display we could find, only to confirm our absolute worst fear. There were 0 phone chargers. None. I mean, people were literally giving up their own cash just to buy a few percent of battery life from somebody else to FaceTime their best friends. But the undeniable truth was, when your phone's dead, it's dead. Once those screens went black, our very last tether to the outside world was severed completely. The isolation was immediate and heavy.
Which brings us to Section 1, securing the bare necessities. Once that initial panic of isolation settled down a bit, the scramble really began. We had to figure out what was actually valuable to keep ourselves alive and functioning in a building packed with thousands of random items. It became this intense game of radical prioritization. You could immediately see a distinct line drawn right between the tourists and the survivalists. On one side, you had people just loading up their carts with short-term luxuries, candy, chips, soda, treating the whole thing like a free shopping spree. But those of us actually prepping for a long-haul siege, we were hunting for long-term survival gear. We're talking sleeping bags, portable power banks, and yeah, even grabbing massive stacks of paper napkins just to fashion into makeshift pillows. Prioritizing those limited supplies over a quick sugar rush, well, that was the very first test of who actually had what it takes to stay.
Moving on to Section 2, building our aisle fortresses.
So, once we had our supplies, the next logical step was claiming territory. The store was massive, sure, but the prime real estate went incredibly fast as we literally turned mundane grocery aisles into highly defended strategic bases. And comparing the fort-building tactics here is just fascinating. Take Fort Freezy, for example. These guys set up right by the freezers in the back of the store. Their massive advantage? They laid claim to the store's entire meat supply. If you wanted protein, you had to barter with the Freezy boys. It was an aggressive public power play right out in the open. But then, on the flip side, another team found the empty manager's office. Their strategy was purely defensive. They had 4 walls, a lockable door, physical isolation, and even a private mini-fridge. It really highlights the ultimate strategic trade-off. Do you want to control the vital food resources out in the open, or do you want the psychological comfort of a highly defensible, locked room? Let me tell you, by the time the lights dimmed on that very first night, the paranoia really started creeping in. People were dragging heavy metal display racks and shopping carts to barricade their perimeters. One of the contestants actually said it best. It feels almost like a zombie apocalypse. And it really did. We were literally constructing alarm systems out of metal chains just so we could hear if a rival team was trying to sneak in while we slept. The tension in the air was so thick you could cut it with a knife. All right, Section 3, hygiene and daily survival. Once the adrenaline of fort building wore off, the grueling reality of daily life hit hard. We had to figure out how to just exist as humans without proper facilities. You want to know how we actually stayed clean? Listen to this brutal makeshift showering system we came up with. Step 1. Locate a heavy-duty industrial hose in the steamy back room. Step 2, drape it over a door frame to simulate a showerhead. Step 3, strip down and shower in freezing cold water. Yeah, it was far from luxurious, obviously, but coming up with these creative methods to wash off the grime was absolutely essential to keeping morale from totally collapsing.
But physical health was really only half the battle. We had to fight off mental decay, too. So we completely transformed the store's inventory to save our sanity. The aisles literally became our bedrooms. People were sleeping directly on bare metal shelves or those inflatable pool floaties. We built a makeshift gym, using heavy water jugs for bench presses just so our muscles wouldn't atrophy.
We even created this sort of community center vibe, gathering around to listen to live, improvised music from the older contestants. We had to stay active, or the boredom would just swallow us whole.
Next up, Section 4, Forging Grocery Store Alliances. You can only sing songs together for so long before tribalism completely takes over. Survival in there heavily relied on numbers, and these massive, dominant alliances started forming. Just having someone to watch your back while you slept, that was worth its weight in gold. The most significant shift happened when Fort Freezy actually merged with another group from the milk aisle called the Dream Team. But physical endurance and big alliances weren't the only ways to win. To break up these strong communities, a contestant named Xavier introduced a tactic he called organized chaos. It was basically a deliberate strategy of unprovoked sabotage designed entirely to severely stress his competitors out until they just quit.
Which leads us straight into Section 5, the late-night sabotage. This strategy really kicked off a dark chapter in the challenge. The relative peace of those first few days vanished, and the grocery store quickly morphed into a sleep-deprived war zone. Hostilities escalated so rapidly, we're talking dirty tactics and coordinated nighttime raids. It started off somewhat petty around night 5, with Xavier sneaking into the Dream Team's camp and actually stabbing holes in the pool floaties they were using as beds. Then it escalated to 4 a.m. raids. A group would literally stand right outside the older couple's camp, aggressively banging pots and pans just to inflict pure sleep deprivation. By day 20, Xavier stole the store's only basketball and threw it in the dumpster, totally eliminating our only source of entertainment. And then the climax, a fake top 10 ceremony orchestrated by the Dream Team. They used it as a massive distraction so Colin could sprint around the store and steal almost everyone's cooking burners.
The cascading effects of this sabotage were just devastating. Targeting our few sources of joy or comfort fractured the alliances completely. When the basketball went missing, Autumn correctly called out Xavier, right? But he masterfully manipulated the group into thinking she was lying and turned the entire store against her until she finally quit. When the burners were stolen, one contestant, Juan, actually managed to keep his. Well, in retaliation for Juan not sharing it, Gunnar forcefully smashed all of Juan's cooking pots right on the floor, condemning him to a miserable cold food diet of crackers and beef jerky for the rest of the time. It was pure anarchy. Spirits weren't just bruised, they were entirely broken.
And that brings us to Section 6, the psychological breaking point.
Ultimately, there was an emotional toll that no amount of fort building, bartering, or sabotage could defend against. We were all reaching our absolute psychological breaking point. As one contestant put it perfectly, I just feel like money can't replace time. As the weeks dragged on, the agonizing guilt of missing our families, our spouses, and especially our children became by far the heaviest weight we carried. I mean, contestants were going up to the front glass doors just to stare at their kids from the inside. When you're sleeping on a metal shelf, eating cold sardines, and missing out on your child's life, suddenly that prize money starts to look a whole lot less shiny.
And that is exactly when the organizers struck with absolute genius. Once we hit the top 10, completely exhausted and deeply homesick, the sponsor dropped a bombshell buyout offer. If you walked out the doors right then and there, you wouldn't leave empty-handed. You'd get a curated box of goods and $5,000 in cold, hard cash. It was a temptation explicitly designed to exploit our dwindling willpower. Staring down months of more sabotage versus walking out immediately with $5,000 to go hug your kids, man, people drop like flies.
So, you've heard about the makeshift showers, the stolen burners, the shattered pots, and the endless sleepless nights. We survived the aisles, yeah, but it took a piece of us with it. So, I'm going to leave you with this. Knowing the absolute psychological warfare, the isolation, and the sheer desperation that unfolds when regular people are locked in a cage together with limited supplies, is $250,000 genuinely worth losing your sanity over a popped pool floaty? What would you actually be willing to endure? Just think about that the next time you stroll down the cereal aisle. Thanks for joining me on the inside, and I'll catch you on the next explainer.